I surveyed the scene with pride. I was the youngest one there. Even Curly, if he had been there, had turned 15, so he was older than me. I could tell Derry realized this too. And although he was proud of me, I also knew he was worried. Shoot, I thought, I'd fight so good this time he won't ever worry about me again. I'll show him that someone besides Soda Pop can use his head. One of the Brumley guys waved me over. We mostly stuck to our own outfits, so that this little leery so I was a little leery of going over to him, but I shrugged. He asked me to borrow weed, then lit up. This big guy, y'all, you know him pretty well? I ought to. He's my brother, I said. I could honestly say yes. I knew Derry as well as he knew me, and that isn't saying a whole lot. No kidding? I got a feeling he's gonna be asked to start the fireworks around here. He's a pretty good bopper. He pretty good bopper? He meant rumbler. Those Brownie boys have their own weird vocabulary. I doubt if half of them can read a newspaper or spell much more than their names. It comes to their speech. I mean, take a guy that calls a rumble bop action. You can't tell isn't really educated. Yeah, I said, but why him? He shrugged. Why anybody else? I looked our outfits over. Most greasers don't have real tough builds or anything. They're mostly lean and kind of panther looking in slouchy ways. This is partly because they don't eat much and partly because they're slouchy. Derry looked like he could whip anyone there. I think most of the guys were nervous because there were no weapons rule. I didn't know about the Brumley boys, but I knew Shepherd's gang used to fighting with anything they could get their hands on: bicycle chains, blades, pop bottles, piece of pipe, pole sticks, and sometimes even heaters. I mean, guns. I have a kind of lousy vocabulary too. Even if I'm educated, our gang never went in for weapons. We're just not that rough. The only weapons we ever used was knives and shoot. We carried mostly just for looks, like Two Bit with his black handled switch. None of us had ever really hurt anybody or wanted to, just Johnny, and he didn't want to. Hey, Curtis, Tim yelled. I jumped. Which one? I heard Soda yell back. The big one. Come over here. The guy from Brummy looked at me. What did I tell you? I watched Derry going toward Tim, the leader of the Brumley boys. He shouldn't be here, I thought suddenly. I shouldn't be here, and Steve shouldn't be here, and Soda shouldn't be here, and Two Bit shouldn't be here. We're greasers. We're not hoods. We don't belong in this bunch of future convicts. We could end up like them. I thought we could, and the rest didn't help my headache. And the thought didn't help my headache. I went back to stand with Soda and Steve and Two Bit then because socials were arriving right on time. They came in 4 carloads and filed out silently. I counted 22 of them. There were 20 of us, so I figured the odds were about as even as they get. Derry always liked to take on 2 at a time anyway. They looked like they were all cut from the same piece of cloth, clean shaven and semi beetle haircuts, wearing striped or checkered shirts and light red or tan colored jackets or madras ski jackets. They could easily have been going to the movies or as to a rumble. That's why people don't even blame the socias and are always ready to jump on us. We looked hoodie and they looked decent. It could be the other way around. Half the hoods I know are pretty decent guys underneath all the grease, and from what I've heard, the socials are just cold-blooded mean. But people usually go by looks. They lined up silently facing us, and we were facing them. I looked for Randy, but didn't see him. I hoped he wasn't there. Guy from with a Madras shirt stepped up. Let's get the rules straight. Nothing but our fists and fight to run, lose. Nothing but our fists, and the first to run, lose, right? Tim flipped away his beer can. You're savvy, real good. There was an uneasy silence. Who's going to start this? Derry solved the problem. He stepped forward under the circle of light made by the street lamp. For a minute, everything was unreal. like a scene out of a JD movie or something. Then Darius said, "I'll take on anyone." He stood there, tall, broad-shouldered, his muscles taut under his t-shirt and his eye glittering like ice. For a second, it looked like there wasn't anyone brave enough to take him on. Then there was a slight stirred, faceless mob of Socs. A husky blond guy stepped forward. He looked at Derry and said quietly, "Hello, Daryl." Something flinched behind Derry's eyes, and then he threw ice again. "Hello, Paul." I heard Soda give a kind of squeal and realized that was the blonde was Paul Holden. He had been the best halfback on Derry's football team at high school, and he and Derry used to buddy it around all the time. He must be a junior in college by now, I thought. He was looking at Derry with an expression I couldn't quite place, but disliked. Contempt, pity, hate, all three. Why? Because Derry was standing there representing all of us, and maybe Paul felt only contempt and pity and hate for the greasers. Derry hadn't moved a muscle or changed expression, but you could see he hated Paul now. It wasn't only jealousy. Derry had the right to be jealous. He was ashamed to be on our side, ashamed to be seen with the Brumley boys, Shepard's gang, maybe even us. Nobody realized it but me and Soda. It didn't matter to anyone but me and Soda. That's stupid, I thought swiftly. They both come here to fight and they both supposed to be smarter than that. What difference does it make? What does the side make? Then Paul said, "I'll take you," and said something like a smile crossed Derry's face. I knew Derry had thought he could take Paul anytime, but 2 or 3 years ago. But what if Paul was better now? I swallowed. Neither one of my brothers had ever been beaten in a fight, but I wasn't exactly itching for someone to break that record. They moved in a circle under the light, counterclockwise, eyeing each other, sizing each other up, maybe remembering old faults and wondering if they were still there. The rest of us waited with the mounting tension. I was reminded of Jack London's book, where the wolf pack waits in silence for one or two members to go down in a fight. But it was different there. The moment either one swung a punch, the rumble would be on. The silence grew heavier, and I could hear the harsh, heavy breathing of the boys around me. Still, and the Soch walked slowly in a circle. Even I could feel their hatred. They used to be buddies, I thought, and they used to be friends. And now they hate each other because one has to work for them, the other one comes from the West Side. They shouldn't hate each other. I don't hate the Socs anymore. They shouldn't hate. Hold up, a familiar voice yelled. Hold on. Derry turned to see what it was. Paul swung, a hard right to the jaw that would have felled anyone but Derry. The rumble was on. Dallas Winston ran to join us. I couldn't find a Soc my size, so I took the next best size, jumped on him. Dallas was right beside me, already on top of someone. I thought you were in the hospital, I yelled as the Soc knocked me to the ground and I rolled to avoid getting kicked. I was. Daly was having a hard time because his left arm was still in a bad shape. I am. I ain't now. How? I managed to ask as the Soc was fighting, leaped on me, and we rolled near Daly. Talked to the nurse into it and with two-bit switch. Don't you know rumble ain't another rumble unless I'm in it? I couldn't answer because the Soch was heavier than I took him for. He had me pinned and I was struggling this and slugging the sense out of me. I thought dizzily that he was going to knock some of my teeth loose or break my nose or something, and I knew I didn't have a chance. But Derry was keeping an eye out for me. He caught that guy by the shoulder and half lifted him up before knocking him 3 feet with a sledgehammer blow. I decided it would be fair for me to help Daly since he could only use one arm. They were slugging it out, but Dallas was getting the worst of it, so I jumped on the Soci's back, pulling his hair and pounding him. He reached back and caught me by the neck and threw me over his head to the ground. Tim Shepard was the fighting one, two at once, accidentally stepped on me, knocking my breath out. I was up again as soon as I got my wind and jumped back right back on the Soch, trying my best to strangle him. While he was prying my fingers loose, Daly knocked me backwards so that all three of us rolled to the ground, gasping, cursing, and punching. Somebody kicked me hard in the ribs, and I yelled in spite of myself. Some Soch had knocked one of our bunch and was kicking me as hard as he could, but I had both arms wrapped around the other Soch's neck and refused to let go. Daly was slugging him, and I hung on desperately, although the other Soch was kicking me, and you better believe it hurt. Finally, he kicked me in the head so hard it stunned me, and I lay limp, trying to clear my mind and was keeping from blacking out. I could hear the racket, but only dimly through the buzzing in my ears. Numerous bruises along my back and my face were throbbing, but I felt detached from the pain, as if it wasn't really me feeling it.